This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Brandon Dragon's new novel, Mr. Bingley, Just as a Gentleman Ought to Be, a Pride and Prejudice variation with a twist. In this story, we learn the hidden truth about the affable Mr. Bingley, who is much more than he appeared on first impression. Follow Mr. Bingley down a rabbit hole of intrigue and corruption as he fights to protect the country's most vulnerable alongside friends old and new, and find out if he can do it before he loses Jane forever. Find Mr. Bingley on Amazon now.
This is Radical Love Live, an ongoing series of conversations with thought leaders exploring faith outside the boxes. Hosted by Mark Dilcomb and Kelly Wilson.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Kelly.
How are you today?
I am freaking awesome as always.
Oh, man, it's so good to hear that.
I know. That's what, I'm just kind of consistent in that space. As I say, I really have nothing to gripe about. Things are going well. My life is balanced. It's not perfect, but nothing is, but I'm trying to do some good stuff in the world.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think you are.
Thank you.
So you got a little feeling.
Yes, I'm
political
starting
today?
to door on me and feeling a little political today. So,
I see.
Yes. So, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
ready. I'm ready for the weekend. But it's been a busy week, busy season. I'm juggling like 4 podcasts right now. So
You're the podcast master. Wow.
I don't know, master, but definitely I'm learning on the fly.
Yes,
So, yeah.
you are.
Yeah,
Yes,
if
you
anybody needs some like really light editing in Premiere Pro, call me up. I think I'm
are. Wow. Okay.
starting to learn. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, doing well.
Happy to hear it. Can you believe it? It's almost fourth quarter of the year. October right around the corner, though, right?
That's right.
Isn't
That's
that
right.
crazy?
It's almost time for beer camp.
It is beer camp. I will be at Theology Beer Camp on October 17th and 18th and 19th. Yes,
That's
I'll
right.
be there.
Denver, Colorado.
I'm looking forward to it. It's St. Andrew's Methodist Church.
And there's still tickets available.
There are still tickets available.
And
Yes.
you can get a discount code if you use our code, which you can find in the show notes.
Yes, that's correct. And so check that out. And the website is theologybeer.camp. But make sure you have your code if you're going to buy tickets. They are still available. There's you'll see the folks are going to be there. This is the one that Trip Fuller does. You also have Tom Ord's going to be there, Catherine Heller, John the Tamanil.
Ilya Delio is going to be there.
Yes, Ilya Delio is going to be there.
McLaren
Yes.
is going to be there.
And Diana Bass Butler or Butler Bass.
Yes.
Yes, let's get that correct. So she's going to be there, and there's more. Like if you go there, check it out. So it's going to be 3 days packed with amazing keynotes.
And they're also going to be doing online sessions for people who can't make it to Denver.
Exactly. So you can dial in and see that remotely as well. I'm going to be there representing Radical Love Live as one of the podcasters as well. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. I'm going to be back here in the jurors, but I'm going to be online.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Holding down the fort.
That's right.
So Kelly, my friend, what are we doing today?
We are talking with the Faithiest Atheist. Or it's changed a little bit recently. It's the Fallen Ape-Theist.
Say that as 3 times.
I won't.
Okay.
Fallen
Ape.
But yeah, I online, I follow a lot of different religious voices and non-religious voices and marginally religious voices. And, like to get a lot, find where the edges of discussion and controversy.
I love that about you. Yeah, absolutely.
And I discovered his website and some of his commentary on religion, kind of like taking the piss out of religion a little bit, but also but in a remarkably respectful way. And these conversations are just really lively and fun. And I've had fun engaging with other folks that are irreverent but still care enough about religion and its impact on our society and what's going on to zero in.
Yep.
And then when we started talking with Richard about his work, he sent me his bio. He's currently a senior intelligence analyst and liaison who has an expertise in radicalization. So, and which I was like, whoa, now we're in like real world stuff, which is totally related to how religion impacts our world.
Yeah.
So, so he's served in the United States military, including tours in Haiti, Iraq. Also 2 postgraduate degrees with the University of Oklahoma, communications, international relations. Like, what a fascinating figure. So we had to get him on just to figure out how all these things line up and about his background and what he's got to say to the world. So Richard, the Ape-Theist, thank you for being here today.
Man, thank you guys so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Welcome, Richard.
Can we start a little bit just by talking about you and your background and the work that you do? Because it's definitely, there's different threads there. I'd love to hear how those can connect up.
Yes. Yeah, sure. The real quick story is that I was raised Southern Baptist in a small town in Georgia. I started to have doubts as a teenager. And then I started to think, okay, well, if my faith isn't true, then what is true? I went through like an angry atheist stage. And then I got into I got into counter-terrorism, and I began to learn the neurology of like what makes people be like this. What makes them go from being like a normal person to suddenly angry and wanting to kill normal people, and to do that openly, like to want to be known as someone who wants to kill innocent people. And I began to wonder, like, what explains this? And in that journey, I think I found the true worldview. And of course, everybody thinks they have that. But for my particular journey, I think I figured out that radicalization is the key. And here you go. Here you guys are with the Radical Love Live show.
Oh, that's right. We're radical. We're radicals. I didn't even realize it.
Oh my God. Wait a minute. Are we being interviewed?
Yeah. I thought he invited you.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it works.
Oh boy.
You think you invited me?
Yeah. So guys, if this is the last episode, you know what happened.
Yeah, it'll be like an Escalade. Bunch of guys with sunglasses waiting.
It's like waiting for us. It was like, we need to talk to you. And that's it. Sorry about that, Richard. So I do have a question before you continue on. When you said you went from being a good Southern Baptist boy from Georgia and becoming an angry atheist, and then you said there was something where you said where people want to kill. Are you talking about yourself personally in that?
No. Well, so I study in counterterrorism, and so we're chasing guys who do this. Yeah. And we're also trying to understand like what makes people want to do that. So even though I was an angry atheist, I didn't want to hurt anybody, but I
just want to clarify that. So
right. Yeah. I did go through the stage where I was like, we need to get rid of religion so that everybody can start solving our problems, which is a common thought today. You'll see out there as well.
Yeah. That's that kind of like, imagine there's no religion.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's why my church didn't like us listening to that song.
I mean, it's all nice for John Lennon to do that. And I'm not, talking smack about the song, but that's a little simplistic because that's not how that's going to happen. We live in the real world. So,
right.
So, all right. So pick up. I'm sorry, Richard. I just probably derailed you from what you were sharing with us.
Well, it all ties in, but yeah, my big story now is that everyone gets radicalized over something and perhaps many things.
Yeah.
And that part's fine. I think that's actually a good idea to have something that you think is really important. And if you're radicalized over it, that's not a bad thing. What if you're radicalized for respect or radicalized for understanding? So, in our line of work, radicalization is a bad word because it's radicalizing towards dehumanizing other people and towards causing harm. But in the real world, just in general, radicalization just means that this is really important to me. It's worth something to me. I'm going to, sacrifice something that's important to me in honor of that. So defending and upholding this thing is more important than my own individual well-being. And then you'll even go through the stage where you would say, you know what, everybody should be doing this. Everyone else should be seeing the value of this thing. And I'm trying to bring people into my view. And as you might see now, even atheists fall into this. So, some atheists will be like, we got to get rid of religion, or we have to teach them the truth. And everyone needs to come in on this vision that I have. It's very similar to a religion saying, "Hey, people have to understand God in the way that I understand Him."
Well said, Richard. I would agree with you. Because I was an angry atheist like you, and so I went down that rabbit hole a bit with folks like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins, and
right.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, but it felt really because I was like, well, aren't you you're creating a bit of a religion of atheism out of this as well.
They're certainly devout.
They're devout. Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's devout if anything else. And I thought, well, okay, am I really quite that far? I get it because, reading anything that Hitchens did, like his most notable book, God Is Not Great, he, to borrow your phrase you used a few minutes ago, he certainly takes the piss out of the church in particular in that case. So, all right, Richard, continue though. Yeah. Sorry.
And basically, I was just going to wrap it up by saying that, terrorists go through that stage where they get radicalized over something that's important. They think everyone else ought to come on board. But what happens is they start to hate people who don't do it. And I just tell people, find that thing that's important to you, fall in love with it, feel like other people should learn about it, but then just don't hate them when they don't, because some people won't. Some people will say, okay, that's your thing, but here's my thing. And then as long as their thing isn't, destructive or nuclear war, then you can say, okay, I'm not going to hate you for that. And, we can have great dialogue without making this angry or dangerous. And so that's really my mission is that first step of radicalization, go for it. But you can choose about what the thing you're going to be radicalized about, and then how you handle people who say no to it.
One of the things that's, such a challenge in our society and also globally. I mean, definitely there are people around the globe who do not like us because of, however they've been radicalized. In having conversation between different groups that have different beliefs that might have been radicalized, is how much of their ability to talk to one another is a conscious choice. And you talked earlier about neurology, like how much of this kind of, I'm part of this tribe and I have to demonize or otherize this other tribe, like how much of it is really like innate?
Innate. Most of it is innate. Everything that I learned about neurology is they say most of it is non-conscious, but none of them say that means you're doomed. Just that it's like that age-old argument about whether we're born religious or atheist. I like to talk about it like a well. You have a well that's like in this sacred space of your mind. And in that well is going to be the things that you're radicalized about. And so when you're born, that well might not be there yet, but it's going to be. So the potential for that well is going to exist. And like, if you could somehow have a conversation with yourself, they would say, okay, the stuff that's going to go in this well is going to be sacred to you and you're going to uphold it and defend it. And it's going to be part of your identity. And as a newborn, you'll be like, what are you talking about? Why is it called? Where's my mom? What's going on? You wouldn't get that, but it's already there and it's going to form just like the rest of you forms. And then society and your surrounding conditions fills that well with whatever it is. And also how you respond to violators and outsiders is a lot of that's going to come from society. As again, you're not doomed to be angry and bitter or a killer. Hopefully you can make some conscious choices. I'm one of those non-believers who thinks you can make some conscious choices and you can program that well. You can add stuff to it. So maybe my well says no religion is actually from a guide, but I've added stuff to it, which says, hey, there's value to this. And I'm going to be respectful and I'm going to listen and understand and be open to being wrong. I've kind of added that to my well. So that's also part of my message is that you can add stuff to your well consciously, but a lot of it is non-conscious and happened because of how you were born.
Wow. So do you then find yourself just kind of generally, you don't have to get into deep specifics, but disrupting the patterns of other people that are either being radicalized or have been radicalized?
Yeah, I can talk about, without talking about my particular mission at work specifically, I can just say that there are people in the US who recognize people around the world who want to cause damage. Because the thing about once you've decided to be radicalized towards dehumanizing and you want to attack innocent people, once you become that kind of person, you can't shut up. You can't shut up. And when we hear people talking like that, we try to gauge whether they're serious, how organized they are. Because it turns out that, millions of people are already that angry and kind of identify as something like this, but they don't do anything about it. It's sort of like a fantasy, but they don't do anything about it. So for the people who are going to do something about it, like they've picked out weapons and the stuff I'm saying right now is unclassified, but they've picked out weapons and they've picked a target and they're actually planning to do something. That's where we try to disrupt them. But we're also interested in like spreading this message of a lot of this you're doing to yourself. Yeah, there are a lot of people who are angry and bitter and screaming online all day. They've kind of fallen victim to a social media thing that social media didn't mean to do. Social media did not try to make us angry. All social media was told to do was keep us at the computer. And so it tried like kittens and it tried dancing pretty people, and those worked fine. But it turned out that controversy is what really gets us like all day doing our own stuff. And so social media has kind of made people without meaning to really, really angry. And so my message is you can consciously kind of turn yourself back from that and still have your values. It doesn't make you tolerant of evil, or it doesn't make you weak to kind of turn that around and less anger and more strength of character. That's sort of what I push.
Wow. It's, it's kind of a theme today. We were talking about social media in our last interview as well, how it kind of, in some cases, can even take like a small smoldering fire somewhere and in the echo chamber amplify, end up creating, giving fuel to a movement that was really just like a murmur before that.
Yep. That's the secret of our whole lives. In fact, there's a book called The Secret of Our Success that talks about this, that came out maybe 5 years ago. But his argument is that these movements can form, they become like people, but because all the collective effort that people put in, especially if they're passionate, it's almost like ants. They can build things and they can change things. And so just like an ant, a colony of ants can come in and change a whole field and agriculture and tunnels underneath the ground and wipe out some of the other wildlife. So can people do that. And it's biological. The thing is that we have the power to do that. But we also have the power to decide what kind of ants are we going to be? What kind of a social group are we going to be? And it gets weird because you could be doing dangerous things and every member of that group thinks that it's righteous, and righteousness can be addictive. So I try, and then with counterterrorism, we try to say, we understand that that's human nature, but just try and be careful what you're getting involved in.
Wow. So your background, Richard, because I am curious about that. You when you were talking about the brain and the well and the concept, it's new for me, and I haven't thought about it. Is this something from your own hypothesis or something you learned through school, or is just curious because that's a great way to look at that.
Well, there's a lot of controversy about exactly how all this plays out specifically. But for me, it's like reading a bunch of these books and I'm like, what's a metaphor that I could use to try and describe this to people so that even if we don't agree on how it happens exactly, like a lot of Christians will agree with everything that I say, but they'll say, because you're an image bearer of God, then that good stuff happens. And then because there's this force of evil and this fallenness, then the bad stuff happens. But they agree with everything else I say. There's this sacred space in your mind and this well, and you can fill it with good stuff or bad stuff.
Yeah.
I tried to come up with a metaphor that everybody can understand, but in my view, from what this research is telling us, you don't just fall in love with yourself. You fall in love with family members, you fall in love with certain people, and then you fall in love with ideas. So the same chemicals that go into loving your family can also go into loving an idea. And maybe the idea is not a real thing. So, maybe you have people who worship something that wasn't a real thing, but in their mind it was. And because of their collective effort, they didn't make it real, but they made their work on earth real. And from that perspective, what's the difference at that point?
So I have never thought about that as far as falling in love with something, because we're taught in school, at least I was, that, you can't love an inanimate object. You can only love people, and primarily, and, secondarily, maybe your pet. But you're right. I guess you can fall in love with an idea and nurture a relationship with it. Yeah.
Well, and if 1,000 people do that and they work together, they can work wonders.
Wow.
In addition to my, my podcasting work and work in religion, my day job, I've been an advertising copywriter for the last 30 years. And we use a lot of the language of evangelism to talk about brands. So, and if somebody were to come in from outside who had a conservative Christian background, they might go, oh, you're describing idolatry, and it's,
Yes.
where you're talking about, first you introduce the brand and then, you evangelize the brand and then people become brand loyalists and then
Yes.
they're advocating for the brand. And there's a whole like funnel
Wow.
that you pull people into through
Yes.
marketing. And
Yep.
the idea, the idol, the object of worship is lipstick or
Right.
a
Yeah.
car
Or-
and that's the thing that's going to give your life meaning and purpose.
Wow.
Yes.
And
That's exactly right. I mean, that's how you do it. There was that show Mad Men, which makes it seem like it was a devious thing, but it's literally how you do that. If you want to have a national brand, you have to do it that way because that's how we are.
right. That's the quote from Don Draper, where he says that love is a concept that we invented to sell nylons.
Yes.
And that's
Well-
the first episode.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we were doing that for thousands of years before there was TV and radio. So I always think that like the Life of Brian, the Monty Python show, Life of Brian is probably the most realistic movie about the ancient times, that you're surrounded by people pushing products. And so, of course, there's going to be a religion that says, no, wait, there's one thing to worship. All these other things are evil. And you are to stay loyal to this and reject these other things. And that idea is still flourishing today.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
Do you find it happening now with things that are not religious as well? Or are there religions that are kind of like pseudo religions that wouldn't necessarily be considered
Yes.
religious?
In my view, everything is this. And especially now that social media has kind of revealed it, that has kind of put it in our face that this is what it is. Every politician who's worth his weight or her weight in salt, any organization that wants to sell something, they're switching over to what you're talking about, which is, hey, I'm not just talking about this is something cool. This is the person. This is the idea. Everything else is the end of the world, and it's true. Meanwhile, this person or this idea is the answer, and it's true. That's how you kind of have to do it. So, I don't get mad right now. For instance, there is a national icon that I have not seen in my lifetime, and I'm not mad that he pushes it this way. That's how you do it. I think he's just more merciless about it. But it works. There's thousands of people who once would talk about certain things and probably didn't even pay much attention to him, but who now focus everything on him. I don't even have to say his name, and we probably know.
No, I know what you're doing, Richard, because you're
Right.
absolutely right. You see, my partner will accuse me of being superlative. Like, if I do something, I'm going to do it all the way. Right. And as you were sharing that, I'm thinking, so is this really where we have gotten ourselves to, where we always are looking for the penultimate, the superlative? It's got to be the best, whatever that might be. And then we lock on it and we're going to hang on because that's what we want.
Right. And if you're surrounded by 10,000 people who are also doing it, or in this case, millions, then your sense of righteousness and your sense of passion and being a warrior for the cause is the most fulfilling thing you can imagine. And as social media will tell you, there could be the most attractive person dancing. AI could create the most attractive, beautiful person dancing, and it would not hold water compared to this feeling of being a warrior for the cause. And so I always tell people, because I'm not caught up in this, but at the same time, I'm not one of those persons that says we need to wipe it from the earth, because that's not how things work.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
What I usually tell people is that, okay, I see that you really love him. I guarantee you're a better person than him. And I'll go over some things that they would do. I'm like, you would not be caught in this situation because I know you and you wouldn't do this. And that's kind of how I kind of pull people back a little bit.
Good luck with that, because I tried that same way. I will tell you that the person you're speaking about, that we all know that we're talking about, from my own personal faith, I am a believer that no one is beyond the ability to reconcile. Now that there's a religious overtone, but I'm actually not even thinking from a religious point. I'm just saying, so, my own story, my own personal story. I look at that and think, well, I pulled myself out of deep depths, and you could say that this person has, and whether he does or doesn't, he has the ability, I think, now
I agree.
people
I agree with that.
argue that, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
And people would say, no, he's not too far gone. I'm like, no, he could have that moment Now, with that said, when I say that, or I try to point out what you just shared, it's like, you're a better person than what this person has done. Now, those are evil acts. He doesn't mean he's evil, but that doesn't fly. Like, they're like, yeah, that's nice. And they know full well it's all these things. And it's like a choice of ignoring that. And they still choose to be a part of that. And I say they, and I hate to say it that way because I've never been in that circumstance personally where I've held somebody up so high that regardless of what you told me, I'm going to still be there for that person.
Right.
What is that?
And I'll tell you what you did. You did something that I did. And I don't know when I did this or if it was non-consciously done for me. But at some point in my life, I said, no icons. I don't care how wonderful they are. I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind. So it's part of my well and my sacred space that no matter who it is, they're corruptible. They could do something wrong. So when I'm caught up in like, I love this band or I love this author or whatever, I always know that one morning I could wake up and they could be caught doing something and I'd be like, oh, and maybe, I don't know how much you guys follow NFL, but like 20 years ago, there was a quarterback named Michael Vick.
Yeah.
And when that happened, being born and raised in Georgia, he was the guy, not just for Atlanta Falcons, but he was the guy.
Yeah.
And then one day he did something that a lot of his fans couldn't handle, which was harming dogs.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what brought him down.
Fighting.
Yeah. The dog fighting. Yeah.
So like, I don't know if this current guy has something like that, at this rate that it's going, but at that moment I was like, some of my friends didn't know what to do, but for me, I was like, I knew he could do something. I didn't want that to happen. And I'm embarrassed for all the times that I kept backing him up, but I knew that something like this could happen. So I didn't really have him as an icon. I just really, really looked up to him, even though he was, younger than me. Cause I'm, I don't know, even 20 years ago, he was still younger than me, but I just say no icons. That's part of my sacred space. So I tell people you're better than him. And also it's really a good idea to not have icon, which a lot of my conservative Christian friends in the back of their minds, they're like, I've heard this before. It's not,
I know. Isn't that written somewhere about that?
Yeah. Forgetting it's a point.
So I'm dropping little pebbles in their, in their shoes. So that hopefully, 10 years from now, they'll be like, you know what, this shouldn't be too surprising.
Oh. Yeah, it's hard to have those conversations sometimes, even in, whichever side of the aisle that you're on. I remember at the, toward the end of the Obama administration, and I was a huge Obama fan, and I was,
he had one too. He had a following too.
Be a political blogger at the time and, really try to, tell everybody how things really were. Yep. And then there were some things that happened. Mm-hmm. There were some extrajudicial killings. There were some like drone warfare stuff that went on. And I was like, wow, that's like some cold-blooded.
Yeah. Yep.
I do not stand by that. And I always had to modify it because I felt that tribal urge to be like part of a movement, but there's part of me, and people would really object, like, you can't say bad things about Obama. And I'm like, but he did some bad stuff as well as the good stuff. So let's normalize having these people be humans.
Have them be humans. That's all I push for, is that chances are they're human. That's my bottom line.
And chances are, hopefully they're not aliens, but
hey, I'm open-minded. To be an alien.
Right.
And I know I'm on my soapbox a little bit today, but that happened in this other election as well, because our child at the time was fairly young and was really worried. Came home like, I heard that like the world's going to end because of this guy. Like America's going to end, democracy is going to end.
Oh wow!
And there was a lot of like real danger.
Yep.
And we had to stop and say, okay, we're not crazy about this guy,
right?
But like, we know, like his house is, we lived in Manhattan at the time. So we're like, we're like a couple avenues over. We can go over there. Like, he's somebody's dad. He's somebody's grandfather.
Yep. There's that.
Like, he's, he's human, like like an actual person. There's this entire government around that are supposed to create supports and balances, but let's like normalize the humanity part.
Yep. That's really what I push. I argue with people who hate this particular guy now too, and I say he really is a person. He's not a mastermind. He's not, he doesn't have special powers. He's not even very good at it. He's just so mercilessly entitled to it that he can't fathom anything else. And he has a support structure to back that up. And that's the secret of his power, is that support structure.
Indeed. So Richard, in your professional life, you I think you speak with a lot of credibility and gravitas from that point of view. Do you see others like that? That's an interesting phenomenon that he possesses that. Are there others in this world that have that same
right now, I've never seen it get to this extent. I have seen, I think Reagan was really popular, but, and I had this conversation with a Secret Service guy. It was years ago, but he said a lot of presidents go through this. No matter who the president is, there's going to be like a gathering of people who just think that they're godly and otherworldly. And he said, but for the most part, each president agonizes over how weird that is. And that they worry that they could do something that could satisfy this group, but then really enrage the other group. And he said, there's really only been 2 presidents who never did that in his time. And he had been doing it since Reagan. He said, there's only 2 presidents, one on the D side and one on the R side, who did not care about that at all. They enjoyed the idolatry. They enjoyed being idolized. And the people who were haters were just, to be dismissed. And I probably don't have to even tell you which 2 those are. But he said, it's not really about Democrat or Republican. It's just about whether you're willing to agonize over whether you can really screw this up. And he said most D's and R's are willing to agonize, and 2 weren't. And he said, hey, it's my job to protect them either way. But he said, for me, that's the real division, not Democrat or Republican, but are you willing to agonize over how idolatry can mess you up?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Richard. And it will, for the D, yes, that person, there would be a lot of people very upset that you mentioned that person, because I'm like, we weren't at cults for that person. Well, in
the 90s, maybe you were a little bit.
Yeah. Well, what happens with
maybe we're just a little bit. Come on, folks.
It happens with stars who become symbolic. We just had there was a news story last week about Dave Grohl. I'm a big Foo Fighters fan.
Yeah.
And he's had this image as a wild, like a family man, good guy,
right.
You'd like to party with him, but he's also very faithful, and he had a indiscretion, and I found myself for a moment.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing that shows my I'm kind of like, right, minimizing, like, well, he's a rock star, this stuff's gonna happen, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm violating my own values, like I would not.
We don't know
myself do that.
We don't know the dynamics of his marriage with his partner, but I think we can draw a simple assumption that she probably was not like okay with that.
Yeah, the fact that he had to put a tweet out, or like a preemptive public relations tweet, meant that they probably didn't have the same agreement that Roger Daltrey has with his wife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm all for that. If you guys have agreed to what you want to do in your relationship, knock yourself out. I felt like she was a little blindsided on.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Celebrities can do it too. My dad prepared me for this too, way back in the 70s, or maybe it was the 80s by then, but he said, kind of the gold standard when you grow up, and I was still a young teenager in the 80s, but he was like, the gold standard for a dad is Charles Ingalls. And right, the nation kind of loves Charles Ingalls. And he was like, but here's the thing, in reality, the closer you get to Charles Ingalls, the more you're going to end up doing what Michael Landon did. And Michael Landon had the same thing. So he's like, you get really good at it, and then you get a lot of attention, and then you mess it up. That was really good advice.
Wow. So did your father actually draw that? Because, Charles Ingalls was, first of all, a fictional character.
Right.
And so therefore the person who played him, he gets caught up in that identity, and then we're just like, oh my God, why he's not Charles Ingalls.
America's dad.
Yeah, he's America's, exactly, right?
Exactly. And so he was like, it's good to have a gold standard, but it's also good to know that if you're popular and well known for it, you're going to get attention, and then some of that attention is going to be tempting, and then you're going to screw it up.
Yeah, so true.
Right. It's you got to walk a balance with those things, because I hear people talk about and this is typically people who are in more, I guess, Armenian versus Calvinistic systems, where it's all about
I'm familiar with that.
in, once saved, always saved, once in grace, always in grace. I talk about biblical figures like, Moses screwed up, David screwed up, all these guys were like
Yes.
biblical heroes, but they also had some troubled history. Therefore, let's kind of like let's take it down a notch.
Yes.
On our own expectations on ourselves.
Yes.
But there are some people who also take advantage of that out and be like, oh yeah, David did this, I'm going to do it too. No, like there's still something in aspiring to,
right.
to one's own, to achieve and maintain one's own values.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I try to keep that in mind. Like if I were to become famous and then I were to get caught doing something, I would probably go through a few months of trying to make it work. Cause I'd be like, man, I love this wonderful thing. And I'm terrified of this accountability thing. I'd probably like, hey, look at David, look at the Bible. Come on, Christians. Even though I'm not Christian, I would just be like, give me something to get me out of this. So I get that.
Yeah. So Richard, I got a question. So as an atheist, and that's what you describe yourself, right?
Right. Yeah. Or at least I feel pretty sure that all of our religions are human made and that no deities gave us these religions. Okay. But at the same time, if you talk about fine tuning or existence itself and that something has to be behind it, then I'm like, I get that. I can understand it. So I'm not against the idea of any deity, or I'm not like, stop thinking about that, because I think about that. So I would say maybe probably closer to agnostic. I've even had a guy say, you might even be a deist, because he was like, have you ever found yourself on the other side of the 50-yard line that there might be something, and then like, what am I doing? And then jump back over here. And I'm like, all the time, man, all the time. And he's like, okay, that's more of deism than agnosticism. And I'm like, that's fine. Another reason why I changed it to ape-theist. Yeah. You could say that I'm an ape who's also maybe, flirting with theism.
I love that. Well done, sir. Well done. Because you just in your discussion, I think it's like, you're not a Dawkins, you're not a Hitchens.
Right. Not at all.
And I'm like you, although I don't call myself an atheist anymore. I begrudgingly will use the C word, because it's part of the faith that I am, but I'm much more than that. It's not just any one faith tradition. I look at things at a greater place, and I'm thinking, surely you do too. And sure enough, you verified that. Yeah. Because you're open to thinking about it. So
sure.
Yeah. Cool.
And, the funny thing now, this is a whole other thing, but, there's a lot of atheist scientists who are not religious at all, who are arguing that, there's like computation intrinsic in the universe that leads to things coalescing. So almost like a computation towards coordination. And of course, a bunch of entropy and things falling apart too, but that's all connected. And they're not believers. They're just like, hey, this is what we're finding when we're looking at cells, grabbing other cells to work together. And there's no neurology. It's just part of the metaphysical intrinsic nature of the cosmos. And I'm like, that's going to kind of freak atheists out, but I think it's true.
And so I fundamentally believe in those elements. I look at our bodies, everything around us, like there's something there that makes this happen. Like tell me, because atoms themselves they're always in place. Like you don't create an atom, and one doesn't disappear, but they reassemble. And there's something that makes that all happen. Now, I don't know what it is. And honestly, I don't care. You can write a religion around it or what. But that's the things that as humans, for me, I simply, at least, I'll speak for myself personally. I don't have the brain power to figure that out. And I'm not worried about it. But I think it's pretty damn cool.
I'm the same way as you. I'm inspired by it. And when I meet people who say, I'm definitely never going to be an atheist, I'm like, okay, I got it. I'm not going to argue with that.
Wow.
Right.
That's cool.
Right. And I probably follow more on that part. Like I went after Christianity and I was like, I'm going to prove that this is just another narrative structure that humans use to make sense of their insecurity and death and the universe and all that.
And dominate people.
And one day I just had to be like, damn it, I'm a Christian. Like I can't, like it's my culture, but like I've had experiences with Jesus. I totally believe that other people have their own pathways to the divine, but with it, for me in my culture, like this is where I sit.
I've had things like that. I've had experiences like that. So I don't, I'm not one of those people that says that was a hallucination. Wake up, because I've had things like that.
Right.
And even if it is, like, even if it's a hallucination and even if it's all an illusion, if it's working and if it's making you a better person, then I'm okay with it.
There you go. There's that. Very good point. By the way, Kelly, you're going to make a lousy radical.
You think
With
so?
that kind of attitude that you just shared with us.
So even though I'm trying to adopt the look.
You got the dude look at that. So Richard, I got a question for you. So, back to what you specialize in and your career and, with radicals. So we do hear about radicals that are in different faith traditions,
Yes.
primarily in Muslim tradition.
Yes.
What drives that radicalization?
So here's, I think that like geography and sociology drives it, because if you're part of a religion where, let's say that everybody has enough ground and soil to grow their own stuff and grow their own water, and you're feuding with all these other people, you might be open to saying, hey, look, you believe that, we'll believe this, and let's not kill each other's kids. And you're more likely to develop a religion that's more open-minded. But if you're in an area, and so first of all, I want to say I'm not, because I can see where people would be like, oh, so we're like this because we have to be. I just want to say it's possible that if you're in an area where there is not much water and not much stuff, you might be very, very strict. And so, as you guys have probably already realized, if you're open-minded, fundamentalists who are angry are going to call you weak. They're going to say you don't get it. You don't understand the threat. You're even in on it. Maybe you're a traitor. And here in this world, we can absorb that and say, yeah, you're fine. But there's other areas where you might be killed for that. Like I probably wouldn't be on a podcast saying this in some countries. I wouldn't be allowed to. So go back a few thousand years and you're in this culture where you literally might not eat or have access to water if you're not feverishly on board. And you push that forward a few more generations, pretty much everybody's feverish because you kind of have to be. So I think that's what's going on, is there's really not room for someone to step back and say, man, maybe this is not right. Or maybe I'm going to do this my own way. If there's not room for that, then you're going to be angry and ready to scream and yell and correct somebody. So that could have something to do. And I'm not, again, I know so many Muslims who are not like this.
Of course. No. This is not about the tradition or the
Right.
people at all.
Right.
Right.
I'm just saying that if circumstances are really severe, somebody like right now, if something severe were to happen to us today and you go forward 1,000 years, we might not be much different. We might be very ferocious and vicious ourselves because that was a survival thing. So I suspect that's what's behind it.
Well, and you can even see some examples of that, even though the U.S. is diverse and big, is, like after 9/11, like there were people lining up to recruit.
Yep.
Like we're going to, whoever this was, we hope that they start a country somewhere because we're going to go bomb them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like there was an anger and a unity behind it. Like those two things came together.
Yes, there wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember that. And I was in the Marines when that happened and was thinking about leaving soon. In fact, a few years before that, the same group had attacked embassies in 98. And I was thinking about leaving then too. And some of the Marines were like, hey, these guys are going to not go away. And then the USS Cole happened in 2000 and then 9/11 happened.
Yep.
And so suddenly I felt good about staying in the Marines. So I ended up staying for another few years.
Wow.
So 4 years became 10 really quickly because of that group.
Wow.
Fascinating.
I'm interested in, and I'm looking at the clock. I know that we're going to run up against time pretty soon. The bringing this back to the work that you do online, if it's work, is it work or is it amusement when you're talking about religion online? Like, is it like a pressure valve, or are you kind of also doing some counter, radicalization work?
No, well, so first of all, like in terms of U.S., we're not allowed to investigate U.S. people. What I do, we're not allowed to investigate U.S. people. However, if someone's on Instagram and definitely given threats, I can send that to the FBI, and then the FBI can do an investigation.
Right, because they take care of domestic. Yes, right.
Right. So what we do is overseas, but when we see it here, we're just like any citizen, you can report that depending on if the person's angry, so what? But if the person's like this location, these weapons, then you can turn that in. The reason why I do this is because I was studying two people overseas, and they were in their 90s, and they were screaming at each other, and each person would say to the other one, "You don't understand our scripture. You don't understand reason or morality or beauty or mathematics or philosophy or logic. You don't understand any of this." And I knew these guys, and they had grown up together. They had literally grown up and been raised in a certain way to be a leader, and even sent to Western schools together. They'd known each other since grade school, and they were now 90s, and they were accusing each other of not understanding any of the stuff that they could both verify the other one knew. And the reason why was because they had been split. They were a fracture of a fracture of a fracture, and then now they had fractured, and each of them was the leader. And I'm like, there's something else going on in our minds that's different than scripture, philosophy, metaphysics, logic. It's different than that. I don't know what it is, but it's something, because otherwise these two guys in their 90s wouldn't suddenly hate each other, because they had both fallen in love with different sub nuances to what they had started. And it to their detriment. Sometimes you don't have to kill bad guys if they're determined to kill each other. But then I thought, if that can ruin two, not just friends, but like lifetime, I want to say comrades, but two people who would not have done this, then I'm like, I can go the other way with it. I can create something that says, okay, rather than having atheists hate religious people more, or having religious people hate atheists more, I'm going to try to start something that says, okay, here's what I believe, but I'm not great at it, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. And I'm just going to try to be more humble and more open to being wrong. And I'm going to try to do the opposite of whatever happened to those two guys in their 90s. So I call that one of my coming to Jesus moments.
I love that. I love that.
If I could use that language.
You can.
Do you get a lot of do you get a lot of pushback from that? Like trolls that come along and they're like, "No, you need to take a stand."
Yeah, all the time. And fortunately, I live in circumstances, and I have enough of a fan base that I can say, maybe you're right. But yeah,
maybe you're right.
Yeah, I get Christians. I get Christians who say, hey, you're not really a strong, atheist. You're kind of suck at it, and and then I get a lot of atheists who are like, hey, you realize all the damage religion has done, right? And you're buddying up to these guys, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm buddying up to people who would never do that other stuff. So, it's not like I'm friends with ISIS. I'm just buddies with people who generally do the same things I do, which is take care of their family and try to work hard and try to be like Charles Ingalls. If we can try to be like Charles Ingalls together, then we can be friends, even if we believe different reasons to be like Charles.
Wow. So what kind of following do you have? I mean,
It was all Facebook. It was 100% Facebook, because I had tried the other stuff. I didn't like how TikTok and Instagram kind of made you see what you wanted to see.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, YouTube, I like it because you can scroll and not engage, and then YouTube will kind of pick it up, and pretty soon YouTube will figure out who you are. But Instagram and TikTok are different. You've got to engage one at a time, and TikTok and Instagram is pretty sure who they think you are, and it takes months to reprogram them.
I knew that. Right. Yes.
Yeah. And you got to work at it. You got to fight it. So I didn't want to do anything else but Facebook. And I got to 7.5 thousand. The problem with Facebook is that there's this trick you can do, and I'll tell you the trick. However, if you do this trick, eventually it'll come back and bite you. But the trick is you report somebody for impersonating a famous Facebook page. And then the machine says, what's the famous page? And you link the same page. And then the machine matches it. The machine goes, oh yeah, you're right. And then shuts it down. And then if you do an appeal, the machine is like, well, hold on. Does it match? Yeah, it does. Okay. It shuts you down. It takes a person maybe months for a person to come through and go, why did he shut down? He doesn't scream at people. He's very friendly. In fact, the Meta people had worked with me over 4 or 5 years to help get it to where it was.
Yeah.
So at some point, somebody at Facebook is going to be like, why in the world? Oh my gosh, they reported him for being himself. And that person eventually will get like a flag that says, hey, that wasn't cool. They probably won't get shut down. But
wow.
What I thought was I could spend weeks trying to find that guy, or I could just start over. So I did Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I'm just going to fight the battle, even though there's a lot more. What I see is vitriol on Twitter.
Yeah.
And even though TikTok and Instagram, every time I open it up, both of them go, oh yeah, here you go. I know who you are, 50-year-old man. I'm like, actually, you don't. And so I'll hit the search bar. I'll type in what I want. And now it's been a couple of weeks, and now I'll get a couple of what I want before it's like, it's still here if you're interested. And I'm like, no. I'm going to go back to my way. So I'm doing it. That's why I became the Fallen Ape-Theist on these other platforms. And I'll put one back on Facebook once I get these to a certain point, and then I think if you do the verification on Facebook, you're more protected against that trick. Yeah. So that's, I'm kind of rebranding and rebuilding as we speak.
That's awesome.
Well, we're going to put all of your new links in our show notes so people can come find you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great work what you're doing. And I say that at work as in, it's good to see the non-binary approach.
Right.
Truly.
Thank you. Thank you. That's definitely what I'm shooting for. And when I heard about your podcast and what you guys were up to, I was glad that we could talk together.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you're back running again. And and one thing I don't know that we've talked about, I think it's implied, is that your work also has a great sense of humor. I think
there's that.
We could all benefit from taking ourselves a little less seriously. So I appreciate
honestly,
as well.
Thank you. I honestly think comedy is one of the secrets to our country's success. And we even have a problem now where comedians are shouted down, even from the free speech people, which is kind of a new thing. So I always say you should be able to listen to a joke, especially if somebody obviously doesn't mean it. And I do understand also, I understand that some bullies will use jokes to keep bullying. So we have to try to find that line too. But I think some really good people have said something just for shock value, and then it's caused too much damage. If we lose that, then I think we lose a lot.
Amen, brother. You are onto something. This is near and dear to my partner, my husband, and I as well. What has happened is really unfortunate because we have become so PC that we can't joke. And I'm like, oh my God, and just like the fear that happened with Chappelle being on Netflix, and then how they compensated for it with by giving a special to queer comedians. I'm like, okay, so they were trying to balance it all out, but it's like, I don't want to go back to the time to where, as a gay man myself, I don't like being the butt of a joke that's hateful, right? That's not okay with me. But there's gotta be a little levity in all of this. So.
Right. I agree. And I'm not bashing people who really did feel harmed and really felt like I get that. I'm just saying, I think that there's gotta be a better way so that people who are saying things for shock, because the thing about shock value is it really kind of changes how you think. Somebody will say something and you'll be like, that was funny, but also I realize I could be that way and I need to work on it. So I think it actually can help people not be as bad. I was raised in a small town community, in a family that was well respected, and that there was some entitlement there. And the way I treated other people felt natural to me. And some of the comedians woke me up to it without personally getting in my face. And I appreciate that. I appreciate learning from that. So
well said.
I think there's learning opportunities there.
Well said.
Absolutely. Well, I actually would love to continue this conversation all afternoon, like over lunch.
We say this all the time because we have amazing guests on.
Yeah. So hopefully we can have you back, particularly like once your new online empire is rolling again, and
yes,
help you build some momentum. But thank you so much for spending time with us today. This has been really great,
Richard.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Radical Love Live, hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. Recorded at the Bravery Studios in Garfield, New Jersey. All rights reserved. Find our episodes on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And check us out at radicallovelive.com, along with our personal websites at markdilcom.com and kellywilson.com. This is Radical Love Live, where we explore faith outside the boxes.
If you've ever deconstructed your faith, you know it's not easy. But just imagine if you could have people to guide you through your process. People like Jim Palmer, Kristen Dumais, Jennifer Knapp, Brad Jerzak, Brian Zand, Paul Young, and more. Well, if you head over to www.choiracademy.com and register for Square 2 using the promo code RAD, you'll get 10% off the regular registration cost of this awesome course and community just for being a fan of our show.